The first thing that might come to mind when you see the title: why do I need this video if I could just take someone else's config? And indeed, no one's stopping you from using other people's settings. However, this video is created primarily for beginners who want to understand everything. And we want to help them, which is why in this video, we'll explain in detail how our CS2 product functionality works. This is the first part of a large series. In the following episodes, we'll cover other aspects of configuration. For convenience, the video has timestamps in the description, allowing you to jump straight to the section you're interested in. There will also be a link to a playlist in the description where you can find all of our tutorial videos. It's important to note that the product is constantly evolving and regularly receives updates. Over time, this may result in changes to existing parameters or the introduction of new settings. Additionally, there are 30-day subscriptions hidden throughout the video. The activation links are well hidden, so stay alert. Enjoy the video. In general, the visual component can be divided into 3 groups. Number 1, Ambience, settings that modify your environment. Number 2, Player ESP, displays information about players. Number 3, MISC, other settings that don't fall into the first 2 groups. Let's start with the first category, Ambience, which is the foundation of any visuals. This group of settings sets the overall style and forms an alternative perception of the game. To configure, you need to open the menu, go to the Visuals tab, select the World section, and open the Ambience subsection. At the beginning, you'll see a list showing the map you're currently on. Next to its name is an Add button. It adds the map to the list, and when you enter this map again, your settings will be applied automatically. You could set your own ambience parameter values for absolutely every map. The first parameter from the list is Night Mode. It changes the coloring of walls by overlaying the selected color on textures. It's important to know that when you enable Night Mode, preset values for skybox, sunlight, and fog are applied, so don't be alarmed. You can change this if you want when you configure skybox and sunlight. Let's return to configuring Night Mode. For precise configuration, HSV mode works best. The first parameter controls hue, the second controls saturation, the third controls brightness. The most convenient way to adjust these values is by scrolling the mouse wheel. To do this, just hover over the value you need and scroll the wheel. Night Mode has the following settings. Exposure adjusts the brightness level of lighting on the map. This setting directly affects any glow, chams, skins, and even skybox brightness. Overlay transparency controls the transparency of elements and decorative textures overlaid on the map. Colorize props changes the coloring of individual map objects. This feature's linked to overlay transparency, so keep in mind that some colorable objects on the map you might have hidden using overlay transparency. A separate setting, Full Bright, makes the map uniformly bright. The next feature is Override Sky. It replaces the standard map skybox with any other one. You can also select your own custom skybox. To do this, you first need to install them. You could do this by clicking on the folder icon. After that, the Explorer will open with the required directory. Copy the necessary files there, and don't forget to click the refresh button so they appear in the list. If you don't know where to find skyboxes, we've left a link in the video description to download a skybox pack. Next up are the skybox parameters. In addition to selecting the standard option, you can change the color of clouds and the sun. Next up, Override Sunlight. This feature overlays the selected color on surfaces illuminated by the sun. You can completely disable this effect by setting the color to black. This feature also has additional parameters that can be configured. The first parameter is the Overlay method, with 2 options to choose from. Modulation changes the color of all light sources, adjusting them to the selected shade. Override makes all light sources one color. Override Rotation controls the angle of sun shadows on the map. Volumetric Brightness adjusts the lighting brightness on your skins and local player model. Next is Reflection, which adjusts dynamic lamps and light sources, for example on maps like Nuke, Inferno, Office, and Anubis. Another option, Fog Configuration. This feature could be used both to create a classic fog variant and as an addition to Night Mode. Let's look at both options. The classic variant is configured using a color picker, distance, and exponent. The color picker allows you to set the fog's color and transparency. Distance determines at what distance from the player it starts displaying, and the exponent controls how sharp its boundary will be. The second option is new and can be used as an addition to Night Mode. This is needed to solve the classic Night Mode problem in CS2. The thing is, when painting walls, some objects on the map don't change color, which on many maps can lead to less than ideal results when changing wall colors. Therefore, there's an option to fine-tune night mode using fog to make the darkening of textures uniform. Example settings are on your screen. Note that these settings work best for the Mirage map. For other maps, it's best to select your own values based on the possibilities we've shown you. The next parameter is depth of field, or abbreviated DOF. This setting adjusts the depth of field of the image. To do this, two blur radii are set, near and far. This way, you can control the degree of object focus. Keep in mind that this feature increases graphics load, which will affect performance and your FPS. Next is weather configuration. Using the model wetness feature, you can enable rain droplets on your weapon and on the local player model. You can also adjust rain intensity. Additionally, this feature increases skin detail. Next, you can enable rain or snow. It's important to remember that these effects can negatively impact your FPS. The higher the intensity, the more particles are created and the lower the FPS. Weather settings for rain and snow are completely identical. The only difference is that for snow, you can additionally change the falling speed of snowflakes. All other parameters work the same. Radius increases the size of each particle. Glow radius adjusts the size of their glow. Intensity controls the number of particles. Density adjusts particle density. Also, don't forget about two color settings. The first controls the main color of the particle, and the second controls the glow color. After this comes the removals block. It allows you to disable various effects. Disabling fog will only work if you have fog settings turned off, and lighting will completely disable lighting even if you have it configured. After you've figured out night mode, you can move on to the next main section. Players. This is where visuals for all players are configured, enemies, allies, and yourself. The first section is flags. In the menu, this button is called Customize Enemy ESP. Start with the Enabled button. It turns on flag display. There are separate modules in ESP that display various information about the enemy. You can configure the display of nickname, HP amount, weapon, bomb, and other parameters. Each element has the ability to adjust position and size. Movement's done by holding the left mouse button, and size changes by scrolling the wheel. There's a universal DPI scaling button located above the ESP preview. When enabled, you could scale all elements simultaneously. If it's disabled, you can adjust the size of a specific flag. Most often, players use this to increase the ping flag. Right-clicking on an element opens its additional settings. Many elements have unique parameters available only in their type. In the case of nicknames, you can enable avatar display. And for HP bars, you could choose the coloring method, normal color, static shade, or gradient. Additionally, the background and shadow are configured. In text information, you can configure font and text style. The weapon icon deserves special attention for detailed configuration. The first item lets you flip the icon in the other direction. Using the next setting, you can additionally enable grenade display for the enemy. You could specify which information will be first, either grenades or weapons. The next setting controls under what conditions the icon will be dimmed. Ammo clip rect controls the display of bullet count in the enemy's magazine. You can understand this through gradual dimming of the icon. The next setting will let you see the number of bullets the enemy has when they're low on ammo. This is useful if you don't want to use the ammo bar. Show all grenades will be available if you haven't previously enabled grenade display. This feature allows you to enable display of all grenades in the enemy's inventory when they take a grenade in their hands. And if the enemy pulls the pin, you can notice this with the pin pulled setting. Here, you can specify the outline color that will be shown when the enemy pulls the pin. Now let's return to the main block, where the off-screen arrow feature awaits us. It adds arrows pointing to enemies outside your visibility. Size and display radius adjustment for arrows is in the color picker. After this comes a feature called Sound ESP. If an enemy makes a sound, waves will appear under them. In the next block, you can configure Chams. The first setting is Players, or simply Visible Chams. They display when the enemy's in direct line of sight. It's best to configure Chams on your favorite map, as lighting and night mode affect the final color of Chams. It's perfectly normal if your Chams look slightly different on different maps. As with flags, Chams configuration depends on where you're gonna play. If playing legit, your task is to make the most beautiful visible Chams. If on HVH, then invisible, simply because on HVH you're looking at them 99% of the time. But let's return to the settings applicable to all types. understanding how to configure visible chams, you'll easily handle the other types. 7 types of chams are available in the settings. Almost every type of chams has its own settings, which can be found at the bottom of the color picker. Shaded has roughness and metal parameters, with which you can make chams either matte or mirror metallic. Glow has brightness of glow. Glow Outline has, in addition to brightness, the ability to specify the size of glowing zones or enable chams filling. Iridescent has intensity and roughness of the effect. Since Waterflow is an animated chams, it has animation speed settings available. Glossy has 4 parameters responsible for brightness, filling, edge falloff, and shade adjustment. Behind walls, or simply invisible chams, are configured on the same principle. Now let's move on to the remaining types. They're situational and optional. On-shot chams. When enabled, show the position of the enemy's model at the moment of your shot at them. Next come history chams. They show the last available record of model movement, or simply the backtrack model. The 5th type is ragdoll chams. These are chams that are overlaid on corpse models. They also have a glow setting. Now, let's move on to the soul particles feature. This setting creates particles that appear at the moment of killing an enemy, beautifully disappearing over time. As in weather settings, here you could set 2 colors, the main color of particles and the color of their glow. The Behind Walls button enables display of particles through walls. The duration parameter determines how long particles will be displayed on the screen, and the dispersion setting controls the force of their scattering. And the last 2 parameters are radius and glow radius. The first adjusts the overall size of particles, and the second adjusts the radius of their glow. The last feature in this category is glow. It adds soft glow along the model's contour. Glow can be applied to both main chams and on-shot and history. Most often, players configure this feature so that the glow continues the cham's color, blurring sharp boundaries. Also, enabling glow is necessary for chams to be drawn across the entire map. Moving on to the next tab, where teammates in the local model are configured. Here you could set chams and flags, and also disable 3D rendering of teammate models. Enabling this feature can noticeably increase your FPS. The next major block relates to the player's local model. Let's start with the model item. First of all, you can enable chams for the player themselves. They're configured on the same principle as the chams on enemies. There's also a new setting here, Overlay, which lets you apply chams on top of the model. This allows you to achieve this nice effect. It's important to know that for this feature to work correctly, you need to lower the transparency of the chams color. Also, in this same window, you can enable the skeleton display and configure glow. Below, there are separate settings for the arms, gloves, along with their own overlay parameters. The next item is weapon. As with the player model, you could choose the main type of chams here and separately add an overlay on top of the weapon. Keep in mind that this setting's global and only applies if no custom parameters are set for the weapon in the skin changer. You can separately configure the keychain and its overlay. They work by the same logic. There's also a colorized stat track function here, which is responsible for changing the color of the stat track element. And the last item in this block is transparency. Here you can configure the transparency of the local model in different situations. When you're scoped in, holding a grenade, standing close to a wall, or when teammates are in front of you. For the while scoped parameter, several modes are available. You can disable transparency entirely, enable it only while zoomed in, or use the on plus rezoom mode. It lets you avoid losing the local model's transparency after a shot, if the weapon has zoom recovery after firing. Below is the value parameter, which controls the strength of the transparency. The lower the value, the more noticeable the local model's transparency will be in the selected situations. Now, let's return to the main visual section and go through each item in order. Let's start with view options. This subsection is responsible for parameters related to camera field of view angle. By enabling override FOV, you can adjust the camera angle. The minimum value is 30 degrees, and the maximum is 135. Next comes override aspect ratio. This setting controls image stretching. Usually, legit players achieve image stretching through 4:3 mode and resolution changes. This setting doesn't change resolution. When changing the parameter, text indication will tell you what aspect ratio you're changing the image to. And at the end, there's a disable landing bob setting, which disables camera shake when landing. Next comes the scope options subsection, which is responsible for camera settings while scoped. By enabling override FOV, you can adjust the zoom power in both the first zoom and the second. If you enable instant scope, this will remove the transition animation between zoom levels. If you don't like seeing your view model, you can disable its display by turning off the Show View Model setting. Now let's move on to the view model options. In this section, you can configure hand FOV as well as their position on all axes. Additionally, here you can adjust in detail all animations that affect the view model. The angle sway parameter controls the sway when turning with the mouse. Velocity sway controls the sway when gaining speed, and in-air offset controls the sway while in the air. The next subsection is called Perspective Options. It's responsible for third-person configuration. The Force Third Person button activates this mode. Usually it's bound to a convenient key. And using disablers, you could tell the cheat in which cases to disable third person. The distance slider allows you to adjust the camera distance in third person mode. Also located here is Disable Overhead. This feature allows you to disable overhead labels, both your own and teammates. Next comes the Unlock Spectating feature. The perspective parameter allows you to enable spectating in third person where it's prohibited. You can also unlock spectating enemies. And the last setting in this group is Visual Recoil. Using this feature, you can disable camera shake when shooting, crosshair displacement, and also reduce view model displacement when firing. Now let's move on to the next section, which is the HUD. In the radar settings, you can enable display of enemies, hostages, and the bomb location. Also available is the Override Player Angles feature. When enabled, the position of the model on the radar will be synchronized with where your model's looking, not where your camera's pointing. Next comes Scope Overlay. This feature allows you to modify the scope while zoomed. To remove the darkening around the edges of the screen, you need to set the setting to Lines mode. Then there are two types of scopes to choose from, Classic and Gradient. With the Classic one, you can only change the color and transparency, while with the Gradient one, you can change everything. We won't explain each item because it'll be easier and faster for you to tweak the settings yourself and find the best option. Next on the list is the Inaccuracy Overlay feature, which allows you to display your weapon's spread circle on the screen. By enabling Follow Recoil, the spread circle will follow your recoil, and if you need this circle only when scoped, then enable the Only in Scope feature. If you want to change the circle design, then Fade Offset will help you. Using this feature, you can adjust the fill size inside the circle. Death Notices handles configuration of the kill feed at the top of the screen. In the first option, you can enable a freeze function for kill feed event display. Next, you choose which events are recorded, only your kills, or kills and assists. There's also an option to disable the display of teammate assists when you get a frag. Moving on to the scoreboard setting. This feature allows you to enable display of enemy equipment in the tab window. Settings here include enabling Reveal Money, choosing whose equipment to show, everyone's or only enemies. You can also configure in detail what should be displayed. Now comes crosshair configuration. Default enables crosshair display for sniper rifles, while Scoped enables default crosshair display during zoom. And the penetration feature is responsible for visual indication of wall penetration. It's also possible to separately configure each color for this feature. And let's move on to the next section, World ESP. First, we're met with settings for everything related to the bomb. For this section to work, you need to click Enable. The first setting, Colorize Effect, is responsible for coloring the bomb explosion, as well as configuring the glow of the light on the bomb. Next comes enabling Bomb Indicator Display, which can enable Safe Distance Display. The indicator will tell you what damage you'll receive when the bomb explodes. Diffuse Indicator shows the remaining diffuse time and characteristic indication on the left side of the screen. An additional parameter is Diffuser, which also displays the remaining diffuse time, but on the character. Bomb Diffused adds additional color indication on the bomb after it's been diffused. You can also optionally enable additional settings. They're presented below. By right-clicking, you could set a unique color for the selected element. The next set is responsible for weapons, primarily for displaying what's lying on the ground. However, here you can also change the color of the shot effect. For this section to work, you also need to click Enabled. As in the previous section, you can configure additional parameters. Now let's move to the hostages settings. As in the previous sections, to activate the feature, you need to enable the Enabled parameter. The color picker next to it controls the primary display color, whether that's text color in the ESP or the glow effect. The Rescue Indicator parameter enables display of the hostage rescue progress indicator. The next three items are among the most important. Configuring them can directly impact your gameplay quality. Let's start in order, with the Grenade section. To activate it, enable the corresponding parameter. The color picker next to the button controls the general color for elements that don't have their own individual color setting. If you want, you can assign a unique color to a specific feature below. Just right-click it. Now, in more detail about the parameters themselves. Smoke Radius is responsible for displaying the smoke radius on the map's surface. All additional visualization parameters are configured through the color picker. The Molotov radius is configured in the same way. There's also a separate option to customize the color of fire, as well as grenade explosions. Now let's move on to configuring grenade trajectory. It controls the display of the grenade's flight path. The color parameter lets you set the color of the trajectory line. Exponent adjusts the glow intensity of the trajectory. Using scale, you can change the size and visual density of the line. The thrown grenades parameter preserves the selected trajectory color after throwing the grenade. In other words, the flight line will be displayed in the same color as when you were aiming. The pin pulled only parameter makes the trajectory visible only after you've already pulled the pin. Precise trajectory enables a more accurate calculation of the grenade's flight path, which is especially useful when practicing lineups and complex throws. Grenade proximity warnings is responsible for a visual warning about a grenade flying toward you. This is an extremely useful feature that will prevent you from taking unnecessary grenade damage. Also, if you haven't enabled anti-flash, this feature will show you a warning about flashbangs flying in your direction. Now, let's look at the Windows block. Watermark. This subsection lets you flexibly configure the watermark display on screen. You can output whatever information you need in it. Hotkeys. Enables display of a window showing active binds. For a specific bind to appear in this window, you need to separately activate the visibility parameter when setting it up. Spectators. Displays the list of spectators during a match. Event logs. When enabled, various notifications will be displayed. The names make it clear what each one does. We won't dwell on this. Below are general parameters for the visual configuration of indicators. Next come the indicators themselves. The choice here is individual. You decide which elements you need during gameplay. Now let's move on to the removals block. This is the section for disabling visual effects and individual game elements. Most features in this section are self-explanatory by name, so we'll cover only the less obvious ones. HUD damage indicator. Removes the standard damage received indicator. Carried hostage. Disables the display of a hostage when carrying them. We already talked about the Ambience section at the beginning of the video. Let's go further and move on to Hitmarker. This set of features is responsible for visual display of hits on enemies. 2D marker is responsible for display on the crosshair. 3D hit marker for display on enemies, and damage marker displays the damage you dealt. Let's go further. Bullet tracers. These are lines drawn from the shot location to the hit location. You can enable display of enemies, teammates, and your own. You won't get confused, everything's simple here. And the last visual feature is bullet impacts, a classic feature that's been both in the game and in cheats for a long time. It allows you to see where your bullet went on the server and where on the client. That's all. In the next part, we'll talk about configuring the skin changer and the misc section. Thank you for watching. This has been the Neverlose team. Stay tuned for more insights in our upcoming videos.